Hey, my name is Dr. Sean Price, Clinical Coordinator here at The Fix in Fort Walton Beach. This is video number 3 in our metabolic series. In the first 2 videos we talked about basically thyroid metabolism. And again, that's kind of a misnomer. It's not necessarily thyroid metabolism because the thyroid is only involved right here. It's more the thyroid metabolic pathway, which includes all of this. And we talked about how there could be breakdowns in the system, how you may have totally normal labs, but still have breakdowns and still have hypothyroid symptoms, even though your labs are normal. And the reason for that is because of the breakdown somewhere in this pathway. So that's the thyroid aspect of it. Now we're going to start getting into other aspects that affect metabolism and affect our overall health and affect our body. So this video, I want to talk specifically about blood sugar. Now I've got a whole series of videos on YouTube regarding blood sugar, but I'm going to go into just a good basic summary on this video. So blood sugar, there's a couple things we need to keep in mind. We've got inflammation. Because of it causing so much inflammation in the body, blood sugar is an absolute deal breaker when it comes to recovering your health. I'm going to talk about cholesterol, how it affects your cholesterol levels, and how it's actually a metabolic stressor. So the way blood sugar works is you have a normal range of blood sugar. You get hungry when your blood sugar goes down, you eat, comes back up, then it goes down, and you do this normal waxing and waning. And that goes with your body bringing in glucose and then metabolizing it, and then the glucose being diminished, so you get hungry again, so you eat more. So the way that your body gets this glucose into the cell is basically you have receptor sites on your cells. So when you eat and glucose is increased, then glucose cannot get in the cell without insulin. So insulin comes in, binds to the cell, and that opens it up so glucose can go in. Glucose then goes into the mitochondria. The mitochondria will take that glucose and convert it into adenotriphosphate, which is the energy currency of the body. So that's how glucose is metabolized. Now, glucose is the breakdown of the sugars that we eat in our diet. So that's the basics of that, okay? So you get hungry, you eat, your blood glucose goes up, insulin's released, attaches to the receptor site, goes in, creates fuel, the fuel goes in, the body uses that as fuel, and you're satisfied, and then when this glucose drops again, you eat again. So it's this normal up and down. All right, that's a normal process for blood sugar. Now, what can happen is if you eat too much glucose, then what will end up happening is you get excess glucose in your system. And when you do that, when glucose goes into a cell, because of osmosis, water follows glucose into the cell. So if you have excess glucose, then too much water can go into the cell, and that cell can actually expand. And if that cell expands too much, it can actually start to become damaged. And when a cell becomes damaged, it releases chemicals that the body picks up on saying, hey, there's cellular damage. Sometimes the cell can expand so much that it'll explode, or what they call lysing. And when that happens, there's all kinds of chemical messengers that are released. So the body says, okay, we've got cellular damage going on. We need to fix that. So what the body will then do, if you don't fix your diet in the beginning phases of this, and that glucose stays high, then number one, you're going to start having symptoms of high blood sugar when we look at your symptom surveys. Number two, because of that cellular damage, the body is going to start downregulating these receptor sites, so that glucose can't get in, so that these cells don't become damaged. So now you have increased glucose that you're bringing in, you're having high blood sugar symptoms, and that glucose is actually getting higher and higher because now, even though it's coming in, it can't go into the cell because there's not enough receptor sites for it. So your blood glucose ends up staying higher for an extended period of time. Now, that's how you get into hyperglucose situation where you have too much blood sugar in the blood. So what's interesting about this is when this goes on, your fasting glucose, when this first happens, stays the same. Because when you fast for 12 hours, your body is able to metabolize and get rid of the glucose, so your glucose won't necessarily change. You can have dysglycemia for years and years and years before your glucose actually starts to rise. So there are other tests that we need to run to see how your body is processing blood sugar on a more short-term basis, not just following that fasting glucose model. Now, so a lot of patients have this insulin-resistant symptomatology. Keep in mind, too, that there's another cause that can cause that to go up, and I'll talk about that in the next video. So your blood sugar goes up, you end up with this situation. Now, the key to understand is even though you have glucose out here, it's not getting into the cell, so therefore you're having decreased adenotriphosphate, which means you have decreased fuel. That's why patients who have blood sugar issues, one of the signs of diabetes is polyphagia, which is where we eat a lot, because there's not enough fuel, so the brain is constantly hungry and constantly looking for more fuel, so you constantly crave sweet things to try to get that glucose into the cells. So what happens is, inside the cell, even though outside the cell we have hyper glucose, too much glucose, inside the cell we end up having too little. So a lot of patients, instead of having too much glucose here, will have hypoglycemia. So these are the patients that suffer with, if they don't eat, they get shaky, they get really moody, they get really emotional. That's hypoglycemia. Now, if you have either one of these, that alone will cause inflammation in your system. But what we see with the majority of our patients is we see they have both. And this is called dysglycemia. And having one of these alone is enough to be a deal breaker for you, but if you have dysglycemia, there's no way that your body will heal. You have to resolve that blood sugar, and it is resolvable. There are things that can be done dietarily and supplement-wise that can resolve that blood sugar, upregulate these receptor sites, get your body functioning again. This happens, we do this with patients every day in our office. So getting this blood sugar stable is absolutely critical. If you have this going on, you can do everything you want to try to heal your liver, your gut, your kidneys, all these other things, but you're not going to be able to heal them until you stabilize blood sugar. So that's an important factor. The other thing about this is the blood-brain barrier starts to open up with this inflammatory response. And when that happens, the inflammation gets into the brain, and that will begin to really break down brain tissue and cause damage there. So that causes a lot of neurological issues. So, and keep in mind too that the brain controls metabolism. So here's an important factor. Any breakdown in these pathways that cause a decrease in metabolic output, the brain consumes 30% of all the fuel that we create. So if you have decreased metabolic output, you're going to have decreased brain function. If you have decreased brain function, the brain controls metabolism. So it's going to go back and then further decrease metabolic output. So you're going to start this downward spiral. So it's very, very important to determine, number one, what your brain function is, and we're going to get into a whole video series on that, but also what's going on here and how you're doing metabolically. Okay, now last I want to talk about cholesterol with blood sugar. So what happens is when this is going on, your blood becomes very acidic because there's the inflammatory chemicals being circulated through the blood. So your arteries can actually be damaged because of the blood supply going through, just like it's causing you more pain in the joints that are injured and causing you all these different things. Well, if your blood is acidic, your body is going to release cholesterol. And when it releases that cholesterol, that's to try to protect the arterial lining. So a lot of times patients with blood sugar issues will have increased cholesterol, increased triglycerides, and they'll end up going on a statin medication, which removes this protective barrier, but they never do anything to handle the blood sugar, so they're actually causing arterial damage. So in our office, we see patients consistently with high blood sugar or with blood sugar dysregulation. Their actual blood sugar lab may be totally normal, but we see patients with this blood sugar dysregulation, and we see them with excessive cholesterol on their lipid panel, or their triglycerides are high. And as soon as we resolve the blood sugar, the cholesterol drops down. And we see this every day in our office. Cholesterol is not hard to fix. I would say 8 times out of 10, we see that clinically in our office that it's blood sugar related. And when we stabilize blood sugar, cholesterol goes into normal. Okay, so there's a lot that goes into blood sugar metabolism, and we have to make sure that this is resolved to fix everything else. Okay. Now, the final step on this is I talked about a metabolic stressor. With this is going on, that is causing stress in the body. That's going to cause what's called an adrenal response, and we're going to get into the adrenal glands in the next video. So just keep that in mind when I start talking about the adrenal glands, that blood sugar can actually feed into the adrenal response, and the adrenal response can feed into blood sugar. So we'll go over that in the next video. All right, we'll see you on that one.